Firaxis released a new video for Marvel's Midnight Suns, and this one showed off a little bit of gameplay from the Abbey and a combat mission with Wolverine and the Hunter versus Sabretooth. I've been looking forward to this since they announced it because up until now the footage we've seen has been so chopped up that it was all but impossible to tell how combat really worked. Well, today they gave us a much better sense of that. So we'll take a quick minute to cover what we learned about the Abbey, then cover the battle in depth, and finally wrap up with my take on what we've seen so far. The Abbey is our headquarters, and this was our first good look at what it's like to move around the place. You can see what it looks like to open a portal to the next mission and travel through Limbo on the way there, and it's safe to say this is something we'll see a lot of during the campaign. Beyond that, there are just two other things we're showing from the Abbey. First, there are pets in Midnight Suns, and one of those is a hellhound. Apparently, one of the most common questions they've received is whether you can pet the hound. The answer, as you can see, is yes. Yes, you can. And you'll even have an in-game reason to do it because it improves your relationship with it. And finally, there's a conversation between the hunter and the caretaker about the Scarlet Witch. This may mean that she's one of the three characters that haven't been revealed yet, but it could just mean that she's an NPC who's part of the story. They've made it clear that we'll encounter plenty of heroes and villains that aren't part of our roster. Some of those will be corrupted by Lilith and we'll have to fight them, but we don't really know how many others could play a role in the story. So Wanda will be in the game in some capacity, but we'll just have to wait and see what that really means. Okay, let's get to the main event in more ways than one. The developers showed us footage of the mission where we meet Wolverine for the first time. We also meet Sabretooth, and if you know anything about those two, then you already know they hate each other. And it's no surprise that they're out for blood before you can say, pop your claws. More important than who was fighting, though, is that we got to see what a turn of combat looks like and how that flows. So let's go through that from start to finish. The heroes draw 6 cards to start the turn. In the examples we've seen so far, it looks as though they always get to go before the bad guys. And at this point, you have a couple of options. First, they didn't demonstrate this part, but the screen shows that the heroes get 2 redraws. Based on how everything else in that part of the screen works, I'm assuming that this is per turn, but it's possible, I guess, that it could be for the whole mission. Either way, it's nice to see that you do have a way to mitigate bad draws. So assuming you're ready to keep your cards, you can now play 3 of them per turn. Now, it's 3 most of the time. We did see Blade use an attack that had the keyword quick on the card. And as a result, that didn't count against the limit. It used one of his plays, but then it refunded it. Another option is to move one of your heroes per turn. So this is an important one. I'll go into more detail in a second, but moving before an attack can set your hero up for all kinds of tactical advantages. But the limitation here is we only move once per turn. So we'll need to pick our spot and decide which of the 3 actions would get the biggest benefit. Once you've taken all 3 actions, the turn passes to any surviving enemies and they'll return fire. And of course, from there, you just repeat that cycle until you're done. I mentioned in an earlier video that there are 3 different types of cards, but we got a little more clarity on that today. There are attacks, which are obviously the direct damage cards. Skills can be considered support cards and will have all kinds of effects, including both offensive and defensive buffs. Heroic cards are the most powerful type, but they require a resource known as heroism in order to use them. Heroism, as it turns out, is generated as you use skills and attacks. So from the time we start in combat, we'll be building up to a heroic move. One point I would like to make really clear here is that there is no chance for an attack to miss in Midnight Suns. The only random factor on your turn during combat is in the form of card draw. I've seen a number of people ask about that, and I just want to make sure we clear up any confusion. And let's go ahead and talk about movement and how the combat map makes this different from any deck builder that I've seen before. When you look at Slay the Spire, Monster Train, and others, combat is two-dimensional. All the combatants are lined up facing each other, and the only thing you have to worry about with regard to positioning is whether someone is in the front or back. That's not the case here. This combat map is a grid. If you can position yourself so that enemies line up in front of you, then you can attack one and knock him into the next. You can throw something heavy and send more than one of them flying. But if you stay in one spot, you may not be able to do any of that. So again, knowing when to use your one move each turn will be kind of a big deal to get the most out of your damage potential. At this point, I feel like we're starting to get a little better picture of what Marvel's Midnight Suns is going to be. And the funny thing is that I think Firaxis described it best when they called it a tactical RPG before we had even seen any gameplay footage. It's clear that the Abbey will feature a lot of RPG elements, and it's equally clear that there will be more tactics in combat than we usually see in deck builders because the open space will give us a lot more to think about. At the same time, this doesn't look like it will be a brutally hard tactical game along the lines of XCOM. At this point, I'm thinking this is going to aim for a middle ground of challenge like most RPGs do. Think of games along the lines of Divinity Original Sin that had heavy role-playing elements along with turn-based tactical combat. And the combat was moderately challenging, but I don't think a whole lot of people found it to be just too hard. My best guess at the moment is that they're aiming for that type of middle ground, although the specifics of how the two games play would obviously have huge differences. Now, as always, I would have liked to have seen more, but it's still 6 months until release, and the developers are clearly going to feed us new info a little at a time. There wasn't even an announcement for when the next stream will be, so I think we can assume that it will be at least a month before we get any more news, and quite possibly longer. They did confirm that there will be no microtransactions that affect gameplay, so that was nice. In the meantime, I look forward to getting a more extended look at combat to get a sense of how engaging it is once you really get going. Today's fight was very short. It would also be nice to get a better sense of the quality of writing for characters at the Abbey. You know, if that's going to be a major part of the game, then the dialogue and character building, it just needs to be top notch. And that isn't something Firaxis has any experience doing so far. I'm not saying that they can't do it, just that they haven't even really been tested on that front up to this point. And that's what we have so far. I'll continue to cover any new info as it comes out, but in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I hope we see you next time.